Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today is Angela James, and we're going to be talking about being older, what that's all about, what the harvest is from our life so far, the things we've learned, things we now have to offer. So welcome, Angela. I'm so glad you're here today.
Robin, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, if people are not used to the accent, just to let them know, I'm from South Africa. And it is 10 to 7 in the evening for me. And it's just a delight to be with you. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, my pleasure. So let me start out with what I usually start the podcast with. I'm going to ask you your age. How old are you?
I am 65. I'll be 66 in September.
Okay. How do you feel about being 65, 66 in September?
I have mixed feelings, I have to say. The physical body is not what it used to be, and still kind of getting used to all the, climbing up a flight of stairs with knees that get a little bit sore. But within myself, I don't know that I've ever felt more alive and more vibrant. I almost kind of feel like I was having a conversation today with somebody, and she was saying how age, it's a linear construct that almost man or people have created for us, whereas when we connect with ourselves as beings, and people walking being a spirit in a physical body, there is no time construct. So I feel like I am more vibrant. I can feel my eyes shining, and more excited about what life has to offer now, as perhaps when I did, kind of going back almost to my 30s, mid 30s, early 40s. I still feel that. I mean, I can feel the energy of my inner child. I can feel the energy of my teenager. I can feel the energy of the maiden, the mom, and all these different facets of being a woman that start to integrate as opposed to being separate, almost like a Russian doll. You know how you kind of unpack the Russian dolls and they've got the different sizes. Kind of that's how I'm feeling, and probably in response to that question.
I love that image because it seems so true and so accurate that the little person is way down in the middle, and then there is this accretion of experience, aging, all of that, learning, and we get bigger. I've never thought about that before in exactly that way, but we do get bigger as we get older. We encompass more understanding of what it is to be a human being, what
Yeah.
it is to be living this life.
I think for me, the energy is expansive. It feels like I'm expanding. It feels like the ripple effects that we also have being older are far more, they ripple out further. We have more of an impact. And I think that this is one of the things that we're seeing in the way that society is almost collapsing in on itself, is that connection between the elder and young people, as we would see perhaps historically also very much in the indigenous cultures, where the grandparents carry the tradition, the custom, the oral tradition, the communication of culture down to the youth and the young people. And that's how it continued through eons of time. And with the fragmentation that we see with people living on different continents, in different cities, a lot of relationships being conducted online, these kind of relationships that I'm talking about, the elders and the children, a lot of that is fragmenting. And that for me is where it's, as a woman, as an older woman now, moving into that older, wise woman, not yet grown, but wise woman age, this is where we have such a critical role to play in restoring a lot to do with values, a lot to do with the sense of tradition, a lot to do with passing on wisdom. Not that if I remember when I was younger that I would listen to much of the wisdom that was imparted. It's still there. I mean, I know if I watch my children, grown children now today, and particularly my daughter at the moment, because she's just become a mom, how much she has resonated and pulled through and brought through into her own life the impact that my mom had on her life. And so there's this continuity. And I think that that's the role that we play as elders, whether we're male or female, is that anchoring into parents are busy. Their lives are fraught with all sorts of things, and things have become so much more fast-paced than what perhaps we were when we were raising children. And so for me, the role of the elder, the grandmother, becomes even more significant.
You know, there's a magic to grandparenting. And I wonder if you can maybe explore that or try to define it. Because I'm just thinking of the fellow who repairs my car, and he is a curmudgeonly guy. His grandchildren melt him. He melts. I've never seen this side of him. Gets this great big smile on his face, pulls out the pictures, wants to talk about them endlessly. And that's not who he is in the rest of his life. What's the magic there, do you think, Angela?
I don't know that I could even answer that question in its fullness, in the sense that I've just become a nana. My little granddaughter is 8 days old. So she's still curling up her little hands and getting that Mara reflex when she gets a fright or she hears a noise, and that little nuzzle that's in my neck. I think the thing that when I stood over her bassinet at the hospital, and maybe this is a way I can answer that question. When I stood at her bassinet and I looked down onto her sleeping, and this wasn't just about my grandchild, this was about children, and how we have such a responsibility as the elders to hold space. It's not the protective energy of the dad. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with holding that space, almost like that kind of, I see it more as a chalice, almost as in the Native American Indian traditions, they call it the medicine bowl, where we are holding space for this generation that is being birthed and that is coming through with this incredible consciousness. And so for me, and I think the thing as well is that, and I hear so many people saying that, you can give your grandchildren back. You're not enmeshed in this intense child rearing phase of a child's life, and at the same time safeguarding that space and the wisdom that we get to impart. And for me, it's a lot around allowing. I did it with my own children, and I'm very grateful to say that they are their own people, but also allowing children to be their own children. And I laugh at my son-in-law. He's already got her at 6 days, tracing her arm movements with an object. I'm going, these overachievers, just let her be. Let her just be. Let her evolve into who she's meant to be. And at the same time, stepping back and not saying anything anyway, because not my child. And that's part of the wisdom as well, is knowing when to speak and when not to speak, when to offer suggestions or when to just back off. Because this is, my daughter would say to me, this is not your child. She's my baby. She's my child. I said, yeah, she's also my child because she's come through you, but not the child as in this is, coming from my own body. But we know that, generationally, our, what I was going to say, the genetics and the energies and frequencies that we've carried through from our moms into ourselves, into our daughters, into their daughters, it continues. So I don't know if that answers your question, because this is just really very new for me. And yeah, it's just, I think the experience of watching my daughter go through her pregnancy, as opposed to me having gone through my own, observing the miracle as opposed to being in the miracle, was also a different experience as well.
It seems to me that part of the mystery, part of the beautiful gift of grandparenting, is that you do have the gift of this being, but you don't have the responsibility which parents bear. I've got to do it right. I've got to make sure they turn out okay. I've got to make sure they learn what they need to learn, become a good citizen, all those kinds of things, which are lovely, but they're burdensome. And grandparents don't, that just is the parents' job. It's not the grandparents' job. The grandparents' job is just to enjoy them, to be so excited about everything they get. And we have more time often. We have that time to slow down and pay attention. We're not always kind of herding them into the car or out of the car, onto this and out of that.
Yeah.
It's more that we're able to be where they are.
I think what you're alluding to for me, and this has been something that has been huge in the last probably about 18 months of my own journey, is you're alluding to the question of being in, not present, but being in presence. We don't have to perform. We've got nothing to perform for or to or why. We just can be. And in that space, holding the space for the family itself as well. And it's more, for me, it's quieter. It's about being more in the background than being in the forefront, because we're not the center of the child's universe at all. But however, I think back to my mom, and she was an extraordinary example for me of an elder as a grandmother. At one point, they used to call it Nana's creche. She had all 5 grandchildren, ranging from 10, 9, 7, 5, and a baby, all at once. And her friends always used to say, your girls should be taking care of their own children. I mean, we were all at work. Having been a single parent from the time my children were 3 and 4. And needing to do all those things around putting roof over the head, meal on the table, all of that kind of stuff. And my mom did such a beautiful job in terms of creating that safe space for these 5 beautiful souls to just be who they were, and to just, the reverence that my daughter talks about her Nana, I hope that my granddaughter can speak in the same manner around me when she gets older. Because if I have to think about iconically being a grandmother, my mother was incredible. She really was incredible. And that was her life. And once the children were grown, and after my dad had passed, you could see almost her life force just dripping, kind of easing and eking out of her, because she had no purpose.
So that defined her. And yet she wasn't starring. It wasn't her ego. It was just her being of service to these children. I don't think we usually think about it that way, but in a way that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
We're just there to serve them. I think I've said to my daughter more than once that it would be so delightful if we adults spoke to each other the way we speak to the little children. We say nothing but wonder. You're so adorable. You're so wonderful. Look at you. Aren't you cute? I mean, if we got that every day, we'd feel so good. So when grandparents are delivering that, it's just right there.
I think what we have, you alluded to it just now, what we have, because we have the time and the space and we don't have the responsibility, is all we need to do is love them. That's all we need to do, nothing more. And that for me is just, again, the continuity of the generations. And again, the Russian doll, because now in the family, there's a baby, there's a mommy, and there's the grandmother. And it's about being in alignment with my daughter as a mother and with this child. And it's not about me being, if she asks for my advice, that's great. If she doesn't, stay out of it, because the responsibility for taking care of this child is hers, not mine. There's a lot of that performance pressure that you have as a parent is gone. There's none of this overachieving A-type personality on the hamster wheel. We have to prove everything and then live it vicariously through our children. All of that is gone.
Yeah, we don't even have to think, how am I doing? Because it's irrelevant. We're just doing.
Yep.
When you were talking about kind of giving advice, sometimes I've been known to say to my daughter, I probably shouldn't say this. And she says, then don't. So right. Right. Just keep it inside. Unsolicited advice is perceived as criticism. So yeah.
And also interference.
Yeah.
Because they've also got to make their own way. They've got to kind of make their own mistakes as parents as well. Children don't come with a rule book. They never do. I remember when my daughter was born, and I'd been this pretty competent person. I was pretty young. I was 29 when she was born, but I'd already had quite a remarkable career in the area of learning and development. I'd been fairly senior. I'd actually transferred down to where my now ex-husband was living. And so stepping into motherhood, I remember bringing her home, and the first probably 6 weeks of how does this little scrap of human being turn me into something that feels like I'm completely incompetent? Because what did I know from anything? I knew nothing. I mean, we think we know so much, and you can read all the books, and you can watch all the videos, and you can listen to all of the stuff that's going on around parenting until that child arrives into your space. And it's this beautiful way of bringing us back to being human, and that we don't have to have all the answers, and that we can put our hand up and ask for help. And so for me, it was such a humbling experience, incredibly humbling experience, to see how this little human being could actually bring me to, I wouldn't say brought me to my knees, but bring me to a space of, I don't have to have all the answers. I can also be guided by her and what unfolds for her and how she's engaging with her world. So I was pretty, I mean, as a mom, children probably wouldn't say so, but pretty more moving in flow with the child, as opposed to 4-hour feeds and, all that kind of getting onto that hamster wheel. Children will eat when they're hungry. They'll cry when they need something. They will yell and shout and play and be curious and do all those things. And I think what you were saying is that it's not only how we would treat others as we would deal with children, but how we treat ourselves as well. And the value that we place on ourselves becomes so crucial.
It's a tricky path, because there's an identification that goes kind of 3-layered. When we have a child, we identify with that child, the child in us, and think, this is like I was when I was a child. And then we identify as the parent, but we also identify with our parent being the parent. So it can be a little confusing sometimes. And also, when we see that child as who we were as a child, sometimes they're not a lot like us. They have a very different personality, very different drives, desires, affinities, behaviors. And it's not unknown for people to keep trying to guide a child back into a certain way of being, because that's what that parent is familiar with, or that's what they were trained to become. And it doesn't always fit. In fact, sometimes it's a very bad fit, very uncomfortable fit. And it's not an automatic thing to realize, oh no, this is a very separate being. I need to step back and let this little person show me who they are.
Yep.
We have a preconceived idea of who they are, who they're going to grow up to be, what they're going to like, what they're going to need, what they're going to want. And that can really get in the way. And I think that's one of the places where grandparents are often, because we have all this experience behind us, including some failures along the way, we can say, we don't even have to say it. We can just watch and appreciate and go, oh, like it's all a discovery, instead of getting them back on track.
For me, what you're alluding to here is that as a grandparent, I have no expectation. None. Nothing of my granddaughter. Nothing. In fact, if there is any one expectation, it's just for her to be herself and be who she is. But I have none of that performance, the performance stuff that goes on, and that she's got to bring home straight A's on her report card, or have to be this incredible sports person. Her father is he's a wonderful human being. He's also done Ironman, and he runs ultra marathons and things like that. And so just watching him, even with this toy and this kind of, there's almost this performance expectation that at 6 days her eyes are moving and her eyes are tracking. And going, just step back. This is not your child. He's incredible, though, I must say, to watch him stepping into fatherhood. And I went for a walk with him and her the other day, and he looked at me and he says, I'm going to cry now. So I said, why? He says, because whenever I look at her, he says, I love her even more than I did the moment beforehand. He says, I've never known love like this he says, as much as I love Alex, as much as I adore her and thank her for bringing this child into my life, I've never known a love like this when I look at my daughter. And I'm going, just melting. I'm just so grateful I have the son-in-law that I do have. And so, the continuity, and I think that's the thing that we start to bear witness to, and what we're part of as grandparents, is continuity. And it's also for me around kind of the legacy. What legacy do we want to leave behind us as grandparents? And it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It can just be, if I can, as I said to you earlier on, if my granddaughter can talk about me the way that my daughter talks about her nana, that's all the legacy that is necessary. It doesn't need to be anything more than that.
Grandparents are often so very important to children because of that. Permissiveness isn't the right word, and yet it is, because there's a permission for them to be themselves. Yep. Without those goals, without those sticks and carrots, to do whatever, because that ego isn't involved.
Absolutely.
So often. Sometimes it is. My grandmother raised me because my mother was a single parent before we had that phrase. Then it was divorcee, which was very dodgy, that word. It was very suspect. But my mother had to support everybody. She had to support her two daughters, herself, and her mother. And her mother took care of the children, my sister and me. And my grandmother was Hawaiian, and Hawaiians were not respected in Hawaii by the whites, by the haoles, any more than the indigenous people here have been. And so there was a lot to prove. My grandmother's father came from a very wealthy and very prestigious family, but he was almost a remittance man. And so my grandmother had a lot to prove, and we were meant to prove it. So there were those goals. There were the straight A's that needed to be achieved, and looking perfect and doing well, and on and on and on, to make up for not feeling okay, really, not really feeling like she was what she should be. That's a big burden for a child. Yeah. But I know my sister and I did our best to step in and do it, be those good little girls. And in general, we certainly were. Yeah. good little girls. But there was a lot of pressure. And usually, at least when I hear stories about people's grandparents, that's where the pressure's off. That's where it's fun. And yeah.
I relate to that a lot. I think back as well I'm the eldest of three girls, and the performance pressure of being the eldest. And I remember my father saying to me at one point that he placed on me the responsibility of taking care of the family. And I'm going, it got to a point where, he'd passed on already, and I had this conversation with him going, hell no, I'm not doing this anymore. I am not responsible for other people's paths and their journey and their choices. And it's not for me to hold the family together. And I remember that conversation with him very distinctly, driving in the car one day. And I'm going, no, you and I'm having this argument with you now. I didn't have it when you were still on the planet, because I didn't know that this is what was actually unfolding for me. And so I am disengaging from that contract. My sisters are free to walk their own paths, make their own decisions, make their own choices. And I'm not responsible for making sure that the family is kept and held together. And that was a lot of his own stuff from his generation of his siblings. And so that gave me a huge amount of freedom. And I think it kind of moves into part of what I was you were asking me about, what we would speak about today. And part of that is living my best life in these, we call them golden years, or whatever we want to define them by, but this last trimester of life. And I think for me, in the last couple of years, I've really come into my own, and able to really embrace a level of sovereignty and agency that I haven't been able to before this. And again, in part because we're busy raising children, we're busy going through whatever we went through. COVID just about what nearly wiped me out from a business point of view, from a financial point of view. And I'm still in the space of recovering from the impact of that. And yet I get to do it a second time around with so much more wisdom and so much more. I think there's humility that comes in, so much more compassion for myself as well, so much more reverence for lessons learned and wisdom that's been gained through making mistakes. I don't even believe that we make mistakes anymore. I think that everything that unfolds in our life is meant to be lessons that we are here to learn as our soul and our soul's path unfolds for us. So that's kind of, for me, when I say living my best life, it's an energy, it's something that I'm feeling inside me, and it's about who I am being as opposed to what I'm doing. And that's something that's been kind of almost like the sun rising on the horizon and awakening and an awakening into a different way of being and living.
You know, when you talk about mistakes, I heard someone say, and she didn't mean to say it, it just came out. She said blessings, and her mind connected blessings with lessons. And I love that word because I think that's so much more appropriate a way to refer to the things that maybe didn't go quite the way we'd hoped they would, but they're blessings, every one of them. We learn from them. And there's a big weight to that as we get older. We've learned a lot. We've had
Yeah.
a lot of blessings, a lot of opportunities to say, oops, I guess I need to do this differently, or that isn't the way it is, or I can't force that. I can't make that happen. I need to surrender, or whatever it is. It really begins to define us in a way that it never did before, our experience.
A lot for me, if I think about it, it's like a river, and it's learning to flow like the river and to be in that. And you mentioned something earlier on around permission, giving myself the permission to be, that I don't have to be this human doing anymore, that I can be a human being. And that's all about permission and stepping into the space of allowing myself to step into my and take on my truth more and more. And it unfolds, and every day is a new day and another opportunity to learn more, another opportunity to be able to offer more, another opportunity to receive and give and to be in those. And this is again the space of being in this generation. We have the time, we have the space to evolve into this energy because we're not on the performance kind of roller coaster. I'm seeing the hamster turning in the wheel. We're not on that hamster wheel anymore. We have the space to be. And that for me is such a beautiful gift of getting older.
And so many times, for so many of us, we are so much kinder to ourselves as we get older. I have a lot of interactions with people about a generation younger than I am. And sometimes I just promise them it'll get so much easier as you get older. We get off our own back. You know, we stop expecting ourselves to be something that we're not, and making those comparisons, and who we are becomes so much more comfortable. That's really the word, comfortable. I just today just cherish who I am. And that was not always the case. I kept thinking there was something I was supposed to be or do that was going to solve all my problems and make me feel better. And I didn't understand that a huge dimension of that was simply self acceptance. This is the way I am. I have some character defects. Oh, well, you know, I try to kind of put some brakes on them in terms of the world, but they're who I am. I'm not going to change into a different person. And to cherish that. This is who I was meant to be, evidently. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, thank you, life. And thank you for the lessons and the blessings and all that stuff.
I think what's also been a part of my recent journey is releasing. I know we talk about defects of character. For me, they've reshaped themselves into distortions of perception, and it's about releasing those distortions that were inherited from we are little, that ended up becoming and being part of the identity that I had crafted out for myself, thinking that that was what the world wanted me to be. And the joy of being older is I don't have to perform to any of that anymore. And that work, certainly through my early 60s, was around dissolving all of those distortions of perception and stepping into, and more, being in the space of responding to truth. What is my truth in this moment? And honoring that as opposed to a preconceived notion or idea of who I needed to be in order to be able to satisfy the external world's ask of me. Don't have to do any of that anymore. I get to show up as me, and that's such a beautiful gift.
when you mentioned COVID, I think for many of us, COVID was kind of a real, in riding horses, you call it a half halt. It kind of brings you back on your haunches and you have to start with more intention again. And I think that was one of the gifts of COVID, is that people got to have a lot of what they decided was who they were broken down because they couldn't do it. For a while, they simply couldn't do it. So that definition was fractured in a way and had to be put back together with maybe more wisdom, more awareness, more humility. I love that word. More humility, more willingness to respond to life rather than trying to fit in somehow. I don't even have the words really to say it, but I have a feeling we got a lot of gifts from that very difficult time. Speaking of time, we're just about out of time. I want to ask you, as I always like to with any guest I have, what would you like to say as parting words to this audience that's joined us?
For me, it is about being who we are and being in that, you alluded to it earlier on as well, in that beautiful space of self-acceptance of the wholeness of who we are. And that these things that we saw as defects or things that were wrong or judgments that we heaped upon ourselves were not actually any of that, because we are both light and shadow. And our shadow births our light, and our light revolves us back into our shadow again. And so it's about being on this and allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission again to be on this journey of life and where life is taking, and being in that space of acceptance of the wholeness of who we are. And that's the wisdom for me that's really been, it's integration. It's about allowing ourselves to be integrated. And I guess that's the gift that certainly has helped me come back to myself and to remember who I really am. And that's the gift I now get to be able to give to others.
Beautiful. Thank you, Angela, so much. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you to all of you who have joined us. We'll see you next time. Great news, everybody. Our premier hair care product line, Sensationally Silver, is now available on Amazon. You can order it so easily, you can get it so quickly, and you can be so sensationally silver.
Sensationally silver, because you are.